All right, let's get right into it. Today, in this explainer, we are diving deep into the newly released AARO Historical Record Report. We're going to unpack the U.S. government's actual involvement with unidentified anomalous phenomena, what the rest of us just call UFOs, stretching all the way back to 1945. And listen, this report is arguably the most comprehensive official look at a topic that has literally sparked endless debate.
Is the U.S. government hiding aliens? I mean, come on, it's the ultimate question, right? It has captivated the public for decades. It's been fueled by these explosive claims of hidden crash retrievals, secret non-disclosure agreements, and reverse-engineered extraterrestrial tech kept entirely in the shadows. But if we step beyond the rumors for a second, what does the actual, verifiable historical record show?
To finally get some real answers, the Department of Defense set up AARO, that's the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. Their mandate was incredibly broad. They were specifically tasked with methodically investigating these exact claims of hidden alien technology and doing it without any preconceived conclusions. They got unprecedented access to analyze records, controlled access programs, the whole shebang, going all the way back to the 1940s.
AARO investigators hit the ground running by directly addressing the biggest narratives out there. They interviewed about 30 individuals who swore the government was hiding intact off-world craft. One person went so far as to claim a specific organization was, and I quote, in possession of 12 spacecraft recovered from different crash events prior to 1970. I mean, those are massive, highly specific allegations.
So before we jump into validating those modern claims, let's look at part 1, decades of official investigations.
Looking at the history, the government's interest is absolutely undeniable. There have been roughly 24 separate investigative efforts since 1945. We're talking a timeline that transitions from early Cold War efforts like Project Sign in 1948 and the famous Project Blue Book in '52, all the way to modern iterations like ATIP in 2009 and AARO today. They all shared one common goal: figuring out if these anomalies were a flight safety risk, some crazy technological leap by an adversary, or, something else entirely.
If you want to grasp the sheer scale of these investigations, just look at this number, 12,618. That is the staggering amount of UFO sightings recorded by Project Blue Book alone between 1947 and 1969. The military wasn't ignoring the skies at all. They were actively cataloging thousands and thousands of reports.
But here's the kicker. When you break down those thousands of cases, the vast majority, nearly 12,000 of them, were just astronomical events, weather balloons, aircraft, or they were simply tossed out because there wasn't enough data. However, a small fraction, 701 cases, remained unidentified. Crucially, though, investigators noted this wasn't because the objects defied the laws of physics. Actually, it was almost entirely due to a lack of actionable, high-quality data like speed, altitude, and size.
With that context in mind, let's move to part 2, evaluating extraterrestrial claims. So what happened when AARO investigated the really big, modern allegations? Well, the extraordinary claims kind of fell apart under scrutiny. For example, one interviewee claimed a former military officer gave a detailed account of physically touching a floating extraterrestrial spacecraft. But when AARO tracked down that specific officer and interviewed him under oath, he denied it completely. He basically said the only thing he could think of that might have been misconstrued was a time he touched an early, super-classified F-117 Nighthawk stealth fighter.
And this brilliantly illustrates a recurring theme: mistaken identity. In another instance, AARO actually got their hands on a metallic sample from a private UAP investigating group. It was heavily touted as a piece of a crashed alien spacecraft, but after rigorous testing by AARO and a leading science lab, reality set in. It was just a manufactured terrestrial alloy, mostly magnesium, zinc, and bismuth. Zero exceptional off-world qualities. None.
So you might be wondering, if the evidence doesn't hold up, where are all these stories coming from? Investigators found that the whole narrative of hidden UAP reverse engineering largely stemmed from circular reporting. It was essentially an echo chamber, a tight-knit group of people repeating the same claims to each other. A lot of these rumors trace back to Kona Blue, which was a proposed but completely rejected Department of Homeland Security program. The proponents assumed the government had hidden alien tech and wanted to bring it under this program, but it was never approved and no extraterrestrial material was ever found anyway.
Which brings us to a really fascinating revelation in Part 3, Secret Tech and Misidentifications.
If people weren't seeing aliens, what was causing the massive historical spikes in UFO reports? AARO noted that these huge surges in sightings directly correlated with specific time periods, specifically between 1952 and 1957, and again in 1960. These weren't random flukes. They aligned perfectly with periods of intense Cold War technological development and testing by the U.S. military.
We are talking about highly classified early programs that looked utterly otherworldly to civilians and commercial pilots who had absolutely no clue they existed. Take the U-2 spy plane from Project Aquatone. Commercial flights back then flew below 20,000 feet. Suddenly, those pilots are seeing silver objects catching the sun way up at 60,000 feet. Or Project Mogul's high-altitude balloons designed to detect Soviet nuclear tests, which, by the way, is actually the assessed source of the famous Roswell debris.
Honestly, it is so easy to see why people reported flying saucers. The government was actively building experimental aircraft like the V-173 Flying Pancake, the SR-71 Blackbird, and the AARO car. I mean, the AARO car literally fit the exact stereotypical description of a flying saucer. If you were a civilian in the 1950s and you saw that hovering over a test field, for sure you'd report a UFO.
And as the decades rolled on, the technology just got stranger to the untrained eye. The evolution of Batwing stealth bombers in the 70s and 80s, followed by highly advanced, unpiloted drones like the Dark Star and Sentinel, just kept driving UAP sightings in restricted airspaces. These are real, deeply classified marvels of human engineering, but they were continually mistaken for alien craft.
All of this sets the stage perfectly for Part 4, the origins of UAP myths.
AARO concludes that we were basically dealing with a perfect storm for extraterrestrial mythology. You mix a very necessary wall of military secrecy with a steady decline in public trust in the government, and then throw in a booming pop culture obsession with sci-fi. Plus, there was this massive fear of technological surprise during the Cold War. People were looking up at the skies with anxiety, so any cutting-edge human engineering was incredibly easy to mistake for alien intervention. Ultimately, the conclusion of this exhaustive report is clear, and it's summed up perfectly right here. AARO found no empirical evidence for claims that the USG and private companies have been reverse engineering extraterrestrial technology. Despite reviewing every official investigation since 1945, not a single sighting has ever been confirmed as extraterrestrial. There is no hidden stockpile of off-world technology.
But before we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with something to think about. As human innovation pushes even further into the skies, building crafts that totally defy our conventional understanding of aerodynamics, we have to wonder, what classified marvels being tested today will become the UFO myths of tomorrow? Thanks for exploring this with us, and keep looking up, just maybe with a slightly more terrestrial perspective.